Are we on, Sarah, yet? And a good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this morning's podcast workshop. This is the fifth of our series of seminars at Southern Regional College, our summer series with the business support team. Today, I'm ably assisted by my colleague Sarah, who is Dean, but she's really Sarah, and we'll explain that later. Brian and Aisling. Brian and Sarah are going to come on and give me some of their reflections this morning about podcasting, albeit brief at that. So this is number 5 in our workshops. It so happens we had one last Friday, one today, and then another 2 next week. If I could quickly tell you about those. Next week, my colleague Brian, who's here, Brian McGee, will be talking really about IT and cybersecurity and what the implications are for your business. And then that's next Friday. And then Friday week, which would be the 21st of August, my colleague Jimmy Moore. Jimmy's going to be talking about lean. And really, if you're not familiar with that, that's lean implementation of how you make your business think about, I suppose, efficiencies and thinking about bringing them into your business. And whilst this is probably associated more with manufacturing, it's actually going to be applied across to all businesses. This morning's workshop has been supported by Connected NI under our Emerging Technologies Fund, and obviously our own staff here at Southern Regional College. All right then, so first steps to creating your own podcast. Well, this idea for the workshop came from my good friend Dean, my good friend Wayne Denner. Wayne actually is I've known Wayne for a long time, basically as a former past student, but he's a specialist in podcasting and online behavior, wears many hats. And for those maybe this morning that were at Wayne's workshop that he did for us at SRC, roughly about a couple of months ago, this really is a follow on. And it's really thanks to Wayne for the positive encouragement for me personally to take podcasting forward. And I know he's away in Galway this week. And the fact that he's in Galway 2 days ago, he was assisting me a lot with production. So my sincere thanks to him and to the members of the business support team for supporting me in my journey on podcasting. All right, then. So, Sarah, let's get into what we're going to talk about today then, Sarah. My own background, introduction to podcasting. Well, about 4 years ago, I set up a podcast, Tomorrow's Visitors. I didn't really set up I had a domain, I'm not a website, but really at the time, I had a few projects at SRC and we interviewed clients like the Mourne Mountain Brewery and a few others. Really, I was using a program called Audacity, which was at the time very good, and I still would recommend it. But I began to realize that podcasting is quite an investment in time and resources. And you really need to plan it and think about it and upskill. And probably in some respects, to be honest, I put the cart before the horse there. Today, then, I suppose for those that don't know me, I'm full-time at Southern Regional College in Business Support. I've been working there since 2012. In our role, my background's in tourism. It kind of spans into digital and hospitality and other areas, art and culture and heritage now. And we work very much as a team, and there are 6 full-time specialists there. There are four part-time specialists, and then the business support team. There's a team of 14 of us. So it's a pleasure to be working with businesses, and the reason now that I've gone with the podcasting is I think it's going to be more and more relevant. I'm still a podcast newbie, inverted commas. I have been listening to podcasts, but in terms of production, I'm new to it. And you're going to hear in this presentation why I think it's more important. So I'm going to then go on to talk about podcasting on the go, what you need to be thinking about, podcasting from your home office. What we've come up with at Southern Regional College, we've called it a podcasting roadmap, which we'll refer to on a couple of slides. And this presentation, Sarah, you'll be sending it out. So this is something that I keep beside me, really. It's 6 steps. And then I want you to be considering about how would you promote your podcast and resources. And I've been through it myself this week. I want to highlight my own podcast and then also one of our clients, Brack Tours, who this week launched their first podcast, Travel with Brack Tours. And then Sarah's going to come on at the end and talk a little bit about the support that we can offer you across Southern Regional College. All right, Sarah, if I move on then. So I really don't want to hit you with a lot of stats. Suffice to say, even since March 2020 and now it's August 2020, podcasting has shot really into the domain of a way of receiving content. So news is on podcasts. Just the way we communicate now is very much on the go. And whilst I don't have a stat, I don't know if you can see, like probably about 70%, and that's a guesstimate of content, or maybe more, is received on a smartphone. So they start on the left hand side there, you see 3 out of every 4 podcasters listening in the US. Like that was to learn about what I would call edutainment. So there's entertainment, but it's also you're learning, but you're also being entertained. And that very much is the realm of podcasts. And shortly, you're going to hear from Sarah and from Brian briefly about why they think podcasting is important. So the stat on the right then, the infographic there. So you have 850,000 active podcasts. So over 30 million podcast episodes. And that's really this April. That's taken from Podcast Insights. So that's a couple of months ago. I'd say that's higher than that now, but that's just a flavour. Podcasting's here to stay. Podcasting's on the go. I suppose like where terrestrial television was, there's so many ways of receiving your podcast through different channels, whether it's iTunes or whether it's Spotify or whether it's Stitcher Radio or SoundCloud or Google Podcasts or iCasts or Pocket Casts, etc., etc. There's a number of ways of doing this, but last night my son, unprompted, came and says, "Daddy, is this yours?" And he was kind of knocked for 6. He's 15, but he listened to my podcast on Spotify. It's just, which I smiled back at. So, this is the way people are going to be receiving content, both in business and in leisure. So, Sarah, if you'd move on to the next, I think it's Brian, or maybe it's my own, Sarah. Yeah, it's my own. Just very briefly, these are some of the podcasts that I've been listening to more recently, from left to right. Then, you'll see that sport is in there quite a lot. I do a bit of mountain biking, and Andy from the MTB Tribe. He's well versed now. He's been around for about 3 or 4 years. He's into, I think, 150 episodes. But this is a guy from North Antrim, and very interested. If you're interested in mountain biking, a really good podcast. The cycling podcast is a weekly one. It's been around for a long time. For anybody who's into cycling, this I really like. It's very relevant now because we're back. We had the Strade Bianche, which was last week. So we'll be building up to the Tour de France, albeit this is happening later in the year. Technology Untangled, that's a bit of professional. The Best of Belfast, this goes across everything from history, art, culture, life, politics. The interviews are quite long, but again, if you're out for a long walk, a good one to listen to. The digital tourism one then, I listened to that. Probably one of my favourite is this chap who needs no introduction, Peter Crouch, that Peter Crouch podcast. A word of caution, hopefully everybody's over 18. The language sometimes can be not great. Very, very entertaining. Enough about that. Then the Skip podcast is a travel one, and really interesting to take a look on what's happening in the future of travel. And then follow our good friend Wayne Denner, Zero Lives Left podcast. We listen to Wayne. So that's just a flavour of some of the stuff that I listen to really on the go on my phone when I go out walking. Okay, Brian, I think it might be up to you just for a minute to give us a flavour of what podcasting means to you and what you listen to.
So typically I use podcasting when I'm in the car. As it says on the slide, being miserable / frugal, I don't really want to pay for Spotify or anything like that, so I'm very cheap. And I typically listen for things that are free, i.e. from the BBC or somewhere. But I don't like to listen to things while I'm working, unlike most other people, so I only listen when I'm alone. There's a huge range. That slide you'll see there's a small selection of tech podcasts that I'd like to listen to. I have no time to listen to all of them, and it would be madness to try. So I picked out a couple. I listen to more or less on the radio quite a lot. It's very boringly about statistics and things, which I enjoy. And also I listen to the Infinite Monkey Cage, which is basically about tech and strange things. And then I dip in and out of quite a few others, but mostly I've been listening to podcasts off and on for a very long time, long before they were called podcasts, but I'm not good at listening to a whole series. So I wait until it all comes together and then I listen to it in a bunch.
Okay, Brian, that's great. Interesting you listen to it in the car and you use Pocket Casts. Okay, thanks for that, Brian. Yeah, I think we could do a podcast about what podcasts used to be called. Sarah, then, Sarah, I know you've been listening to podcasts through your travels and your journeys outside of Northern Ireland originally, and then give us a flavour, Sarah, of what you listen to and why you like podcasts.
Well, a bit like Brian, I just like them because they're free. You can listen anywhere, anytime. There's a podcast for absolutely every interest out there, so you can find something to suit everybody. And it depends on what mood you're in. You can listen to conversational style ones. You can listen to fictional stories and multi-part audiobooks. And they're really perfect for the mindless chores you have around the house. So if you're initially when I came into podcasts was when I just had my first child, and it was the night feeds, and you don't want to disturb anybody else in the house, so it'd be one earplug in and listening to things. So with kind of stories and that kind of thing to keep you distracted during those long nights. But they're exactly perfect for mindless chores. So now it's mostly hoovering and ironing, or when I'm commuting, that I would listen. But they're also a great way of learning more and keeping abreast of what's going on within local business, within whatever your interest is, keeping up to date with it. You know, I quite like as you can see, the Kermode and Mayo, because you can keep up to date with films, although I never get to the cinema, but I like to know what's going on anyway.
Well, there's different ways of receiving content now, Sarah.
Sorry?
There's different ways. We don't have to go to the cinema. There are different ways of watching.
Absolutely. All sorts of different ways. And then, you know, they're also a support. When I, in a former life, ran a business. So sometimes you can feel very isolated. So with the Ulster business, or with Thrive in the New World, and I've really actually quite liked the conversations of inspiration with Holly. She was not on the high street. She would like to focus more on women in business, and you know,
is this the one Thrive in the New World?
The Thrive in the New World is a new one. It's a Northern Ireland based one. Okay. So it's but again, there's a podcast for everything. That's just a couple of my interests. But they're quite vast.
No, thanks a million for that. And I think it's really good to get a flavour around the team. You know, there's three different so far, you know, both personal and professional. And this is the thing about podcasting. It is very personalised, and it is right to you. And you know, we're all, in terms of learning, how we learn differently and receive content and communicate differently. And, you know, it's surprising really how much one can take on board when you're listening to things. And that really, I suppose, into the theory of learning. I'm going into a bit of academic theory here, Kolb's theory of learning, but some of us are auditory, and we learn as through listening a lot. So thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate Sarah and Brian. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. If you wouldn't mind, Sarah. Well, one last thing is just go back to that slide for a second, Sarah. The artwork, and I'll be mentioning it, but the importance of artwork is really, if you're going to be launching your podcast. Now, I have had Cahill, my good friend and colleague, assist me with mine, and then Brack Tours, they get somebody to help them to do a little I suppose a logo. And this is going to be very, very important, because you can even see from that selection that Sarah's put up, the 12 there, how the artwork is going to actually entice you in when you're looking for podcasts. So Sarah, if you would move on to the roadmap, then that would be great. All right. So let's say you've decided to start your first podcast. So this is, again, something at Southern Regional College, which we've come up with. So I'm really going to walk through these very briefly now, and then come back to this roadmap again in a couple of slides time. So we've kind of color coded them. Feel free to print this off. It's not a Bible by any means. It's something that I found very useful on the early stages of podcasting. Anybody listening to this now, if you're a broadcaster or if you're into media, this will be use the term wee buns to you. But I found this very useful. And again, thanks to Wayne for helping me walk through this. So from the left to right, then the first step really is you're going to be thinking about recording your content. So, you know, all you really need here is, to begin with, the very early days, what I did was a phone, on a Voice Recorder Pro app, and then I had a little clip mic, like a Rode clip mic, like that one. There's another one there, that's a Purple Panda clip mic. So those are the very, very first things that you need to think about. If you're starting early, you might be want to think about that, and that's again, that's a selfie stick which has a mic and a remote control. You could put that up, and then you could put a phone and 2 microphones. That's how easy it is. So, you know, podcasting to start with can be very, very straightforward. So, you know, you want to be thinking about the Voice Recorder Pro app with a clip mic. When you're recording your content, you can be doing, I'll come back to this shortly, but you'll be thinking about from a MacBook or from your laptop and recording through Zoom. So that's the first step, and I will come back to that. The second step then is you're going to be bringing it into some sort of editing suite. At the outset, I made a reference to Audacity. That's free. I have, for this pod, more recently been using Adobe Audition. There is an educational license with it, but also there is a paid version, which I'll get on to at the end. If you're going to be serious about podcasting, then I would recommend going that route. You're going to need to bring your content. You've recorded it. It's on your phone. You're going to need to move it from your phone or from a desktop into some kind of editing suite. Once you've done that, that's where I suppose the real hard work starts, is number 3. So you have to edit it. You have to cut it. You have to move it. You have to enhance it. You need to be arranging the tracks from your intro, outro music, your main interview, and you could be up to maybe 9 tracks there. Then you're going to be thinking about step 4, and I will come back to these, is about exporting it. And you know, I put down there a tip, which is you export it if you're in Adobe Audition, and unless you're into this, and we'll get to this later, but it's called a multi-track mixdown, a WAV file. That's what you export it out. And then you need to be thinking about, well, what other amendments are you going to make to your podcast in post-production? And that's step number 5. And then really you're into step number 6 about how you're going to distribute it. So, you know, there's 6 quite straightforward, I think, quite straightforward steps, not minimizing. The real bulk of this work is 2 and step 3. So Sarah, if you would just move on then to the next slide, if you don't mind. Briefly made reference, what are you actually going to need to know? So you've got your phone. The second picture is it is a lavalier mic. It's about $10.99. It's not that expensive. The one I use, a Rode, is more expensive. And things to highlight in that picture there are the little pop shield. If you happen to be both indoors or outdoors, you could use that. To begin with, you might want to use 1 mic or 2 mics. There's a bit of cost to that. So the Rode mic, typically that set there could be up to £59-60. 1 mic in itself on the left, as I said, is only $11.99. There are other brands out there. The picture on the right then is the Voice Recorder Pro app, and it has a lot of, you can see I've put in there a bit of levelers. I've done interviews on Voice Recorder Pro, and to be honest with you, I actually did my intro to the podcast, and it was fine on Voice Recorder Pro. So, you know, it is easy enough to get up and running. Sarah, if you move to the next one then. The microphone that I'm using at this moment in time, and I'm going to move it, I'm not going to show you a picture of it because it might, but you can say over the edge there, hopefully, I just lost my pop shield, is a Blue Yeti mic. It's a heavy boy, girl, a heavy piece of machinery. Price tag when I got it wasn't that, but it was about 70 or 80 pounds. You can't get these things on Gumtree for cheaper, but that's a proper podcasting mic, and the sound quality is better than it would be from a clip mic. On the right, this is one that Wayne uses. This is a condenser mic, and you will see a pop shield with that, and that's something certainly to be considering, that kind of investment. So once you move away from just on the go and you're going to be a bit more serious about podcasting, there is a little of investment, but for me now, it's very worth it when you get into committing to this. So that's really step 1. You've decided to record your podcast. You maybe are out on the go interviewing somebody, or you've decided to do it from maybe Zoom or Microsoft Teams. We're using Microsoft Teams at the moment, and there's a function there after this. There will be an automatic video of this workshop. On Zoom, you can actually strip out the sound, and it will, as with Microsoft Teams as well. The quality is quite good. And when we go to here, I'm going to keep prompting my Tomorrow's Visitors podcast, but that was done on Zoom. One word of caution is the Zoom file is what's called an MP3 file, and it's not a .wav. .wav file is going to be of higher quality. But to be honest, it goes through a condensing process. And after the Zoom interview, usually if you have a paid account, which is $11.99 a month, you will get the file through in about 30 minutes afterwards, and it's fine. Word of caution, if you're doing Zoom interviews, I'm talking to you today. I haven't got a headset on. My colleagues do. When I was recording in the past, I used an old headset, and you can tell the difference in quality. So it is important that both you and your recipient, you think about the microphones and the headphones and mics that you're using, and also you think about your connectivity, your Wi-Fi. Where are you recording? I'm now right beside my internet box, but my colleagues are smiling at this. We've had a challenging week in terms of Wi-Fi connectivity. So when you're recording your interviews, be thinking, if it's from a home office, about your own Wi-Fi and also the Wi-Fi of your interviewee. Okay, Sarah. So then back to the roadmap. So let's say you've done that. You've gone from stage 1, and you then, right, you've the interview done. You think you've the hard work. Now, what I should mention here before we get to stage 2, I haven't talked a lot about the planning. One of the most important things is podcasting is think about how often are you going to do this. I'm probably going to run Tomorrow's Visitors once a month. So that's 12. I'm committing to 12 episodes in the year. Wayne, when you read his ebook, and there's a link to Wayne's ebook, he talks about podcasting being, when you're launching, having 3 episodes. Unfortunately today I have only the 1, but you need to really think about what is it you want to podcast about. And there's lots of, if you type in podcasting 101, and really the planning for that, and then when you come to the editing suite, your folders are so important. Like already I have recorded about 4 podcasts which I have to edit. And I'm already thinking about mine's tourism, digital technology. I've already started to map out over the next months, probably aligned to our seasons actually in tourism, to be honest with you. I'm already thinking about what's coming up in autumn and in Christmas and who I'm going to be interviewing. So the planning expert aspect to the content is really important. Okay, so we're now into, you've got the content. What do you do with it? So you're going to have to bring this into some kind of an editing suite. So Sarah, if you would move on then to the next slide. When you've got the content, you've got to, that's okay. I was going to move the other ones. That's okay. Let's talk about this. So one of the important things to think about track selection. I hope you can follow this. This works for me, and I have 7 tracks. So I'm going to walk you through these right now. So the very first thing is you're going to do an introduction to podcasts. So there you've got your phone or your clip-on mic or your desktop, about 30 or 45 seconds. So welcome to Tomorrow's Visitors podcast. My name is Kieran Swail. I'm a tourism innovation specialist at Southern Regional College, and I'm delighted to be producing this podcast. In this show, I'm going to talk about technology, culture, arts, heritage, Ireland, North, South, emerging technologies. So please tune in at www.tomorrowsvisitors.com. Bang, done. That's it. That's my intro, standard intro. Then I'm going to think about music. I looked at 4 or 5 different sources. I ended up choosing for the Tomorrow's Visitors podcast, Ben Sounds. There are paid and free versions. Audio Jungle as well is very good. SoundCloud, and one not to, there's free play music as well. One to think about is the YouTube audio library. Obviously, word of caution again with that, you need to make sure that you've got the license to use it, or you can buy the songs. But there's plenty of material out there. Perhaps, as in the Brack Tours podcast, they created their own jingle. They created their own music. So you could do that, or you could sing. Couldn't you, Sarah and Brian and Ashley and James? My friend James, he's a great singer. You know, he could sing on a podcast. That's the idea for the next one. Anyway. So number 3 then is the introduction to podcast 1. So coming up, I've interviewed John Fitzgerald. John's the chair of Ballyhura Fulcha. Ballyhura is a region in North Cork, South Limerick. If you haven't been there, please go there. Listen to our podcast, our first podcast. So what I do in the introduction is I'm really giving people the flavour of what's coming up. That's really important. Again, that's recorded. I recorded that straight into Adobe Audition, and then I edited it there. The main interview, so I'm giving you guidelines here, what I think works in podcasting, 25 to 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. Goes beyond that, it's too long. And I'm, some of the ones that I have listened to, I'm kind of, Brian talked earlier on, kind of zoned out. But the main content 25 to 30 minutes is a good guide. Again, really important in the planning. When I'm doing a podcast interview, I usually have 6 areas, 6 questions. I send them about 3 days in advance. I do a practice run on Microsoft Teams or on Zoom. I do a practice run, and then we do the interview. So the main interview is step 4 then, and that's on your track, sorry, will be track 4. The track 5 then will be a summary of what you've just talked about. So maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And then track 6 is the outro, which is the music, similar music that you had in track 1, maybe slightly different, but the same theme. So again, it's an adaptation of what I had of the Ben Sounds link that I had. So sorry, track 6 was the outro to the podcast, which is the generic one, which is the same as track 1, and then the music is track 7. Sorry about the confusion there. So this is a little track that I have done. What you'll see once you get into podcasting, quite often people combine tracks 1 and 2, and they combine tracks 6 and 7. For pure simplicity on Audacity and on Adobe Audition, this is how I laid it out. And to be honest with you, it worked. It really, really helped me. I'm now going to show you a quick visual. You may not be able to see the detail, but just to give you a visual of what I'm just talking about for the tracks, Sarah, if you'd move to that one. So,
Kieran,
yes,
just before you do that, things like the intro and the outro and some of those other bits, you only do those once, is that right? You just do them at the beginning. You don't have to do them over each time for each episode?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Brian and Sarah, and thanks for coming in there, Aisling as well. Thanks for coming in. Brian, that's a one-off, so you can you save that. This is where the planning and the folders are really important, Brian. So every time you see step 1 and step 2, Brian, and step 6 and step 7, they are, I now have them for every podcast for tomorrow's visitors I'm going to do in the future. It's a really, really, really good point. I guess as well, Brian, it's important there that you give a bit of consideration to that and you practice it. And also that you have a script for 1 and for 7. And that's where the planning, before you start, write out what are you going to say, why are you doing the podcast, what is it you're going to practice that. So that then will come into play in the distribution and promotion of your podcasts. So does that answer the question, Brian? Yeah,
it does indeed. Thank you.
Okay, super. Okay, Sarah, thanks for that, Brian, and intervene there anytime. So on this, we're now in Adobe Audition here. There are 7 tracks laid out, just like my last slide here. I tell you what I like about Adobe Audition is, if you can see here on the slide, the different colors. So the very, very first one is the, I'm talking there, that's my intro 1, and then I've got the music, and then I've got the prelude to the interview, then I've got the main interview, then here I've got the summary of the interview, and then I've got my outro. So my intro up here, my outro down here, and then the outro music. And that, whether it's Adobe Audition or Audacity, that's what your dashboard's going to look like. Just while I'm here, and I have a short video that Sarah's going to play in a minute, a couple of things. All I can say to you is, if you're going to get into this and do it properly, you're going to need to do a bit of editing. And at Southern Region College, me and my other colleagues can be able to help you with this. But the key things that you're going to need to consider are this little bar up here, which is the razor tool. That's the cut. You might hear that. And the little bar beside it is the move tool. Those are 2 really important. It means I can shift and move all that and cut it out. Somebody says, oh, can you cut that out? And you're going, oh, and you're thinking, actually, post-production. So any of you here that are editing videos will know all about this. And I suppose this slide is also a reminder for me and for anybody in business is, if you can start with podcasting and if you can master this aspect of it, you're well on the way to any kind of video editing software, whether that's any Adobe products or other video editing products. So start with the podcast and your skills will be very relevant to editing. So that's just a quick flavor. It may look intimidating because there are other windows, but this is the main window that you need to be thinking about. And I did this on an iMac, so it was a big screen, or if you had a second screen when you are editing is very, very useful. The big thing to think about in Adobe Edition is this: you open what's called a multi-track file. So when you do that in Adobe Edition, it does give you a prompt to podcast, but I've just changed these to 7 tracks. Sarah, would you mind moving on to the next slide, please? And here's a short, before you hit the play, just to explain, I've recorded this in Loom. Again, I think Brian and maybe James might be familiar with this piece of software. Zoom is a screen recorder. There are many out there. I like it. You don't have to look at my face in the background with my little monkey in the bedroom, the teddy bear in the back. But it's good because it's on the Google Chrome browser, and it allows you to explain what you're doing. Very, very relevant for us in business support, but also if you're trying to get a message across to someone, to a client, or you're trying to, just explain what you're doing. Screen recording, in this case, Zoom, I find very, very useful. So if you could maybe just play that there, Sarah, first, thanks.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to go quickly through.
If you can just go back one, so that's you now, yeah.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to go quickly through Adobe Edition. So this is a screen that you're seeing here.
I should say this is about nearly 4 minutes, but I think it'll hopefully explain. Go ahead.
Tracks that you see in front of you are Brack Tours Travel podcast with Colin Murphy and the staff, Peter and Nuala from Brack Tours. And what we've done here is brought the file into Adobe Edition. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tracks. In the document that in the PowerPoint that I've been talking about, it is in, I think I have outlined about 8 or 9 different tracks. So really just to quickly explain what happens is you've recorded it, your file, your main interview file, which is here. And there are 2 pieces of content. There's a main interview that Colin has done with the members of staff about the history of Brack Tours. And then here is an interview with me, and I'm interviewing the team really about why they're using podcasting and where the company's going. So very, very quickly then, you'll see up at here, there's 2 options. You have a waveform or a multi-track. When you're setting up a podcast, you come into multi-track. I'm not going to give you a detailed lesson here on Adobe Edition because that takes too long. But I found this very, very useful and pretty good to follow. There's lots of online learning materials as well. But so quickly, you bring your track in here, and the very, very first one is Introduction with Music, which Colin has recorded. I'll try and play that now. Beg your pardon. So there we go there. Hopefully you can hear that if I turn the volume up a wee bit. You can't hear that now. You will hear that in a wee second.
Scotland and Ireland, and hearing some great stories from the team at Brack Tours and many guests.
So that's the first file.
Also find out more how Brack Tours can make your vacation one you'll never forget.
File. He's used a microphone, like a condenser mic, to do that, and then he's brought
Hello and welcome to our first podcast show.
So now
Here
we're
we
rolling
talk
on
with Peter
to
and Nuala on how the company
track 2
was
here.
started.
It's an
What we
introduction
offer.
to the episode.
Then we're later joined by Kieran Swail from the Southern Regional College in Uri for a chat on why we decided to start a podcast and lots more. We hope you enjoy the show.
So here's the sequence. Track 1, track 2. Now we're into track 3.
Podcast here. Just a few questions.
This is Colin chatting to the members of the team. So very quickly, just move that through here.
Allowed us to have, which
That's
was
it.
great.
Colin interviewing Nuala. And then towards the end, you'll see a little transition here.
And, look out there, guys, because all the social media channels out there, support Tourism Ireland, go on, look at the sites there. We're putting our own campaigns out there with Fill Your Heart with Ireland too. Get onto our social media, like and share. And we'd love to hear from you too. So everybody, we're coming to the last part of our
So there's the transition into chat with me.
I'd like to introduce a friend of ours, somebody who's been working along with us, and that is Kieran Swail from the Southern Regional College. Welcome, Kieran. How are you?
Great this morning, Colin. Thanks a million, and delighted to be working with you.
Notice the difference in sound there. That isn't being interviewed
I've known you, Colin,
with
for
a
podcast
night like this.
for
That's
many
been
years.
interviewed with a headphone,
Peter, so
which is no
delighted to be
headphone
working with
set.
you
So
on this
you can hear the
project
different
where you're
quality and
looking at,
importance of sound there.
podcasting and other ways of interacting with
So
customers.
then we're gonna move that on towards the end of it.
non-refundable deposit up to the 1st of March. So there's no, if anything does come up, they can always have that
And then we'll
option
go on to the last track.
reschedule or cancel.
Okay, Peter, Colm, and Nuala, listen, thank you for inviting me on. Colm, I'll hand back to you just to close up there, but thank you.
Thanks, Kieran.
Okay, well, there should have been a music file there at the end, but obviously there's not, but we should have had one. So in essence, there's 5 different tracks there, and you can see how this is set up and the importance of having your tracks. Okay, so listen, I'll chat to you more now. Thank you.
So hopefully you find that useful. Rather doing it that way, rather than trying a live demo, you can even see the sound quality there was just a wee bit low on it. But doing a live demo, depending on your connectivity, can be questionable. Hopefully you can hear me okay now. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, please. All right, so that was really, you were into steps 2 and 3 and moving into 4. So you've now got, Sarah, would you jump back to the roadmap for a second? I know we talked about this. So that's you there, yeah. So you've edited, you've cut it, you've enhanced it. You're now wanting to really, you've decided to export the file, which you've done. You've hit export, and remember I said that's a multi-track. It's called a mixdown file. So you've hit that on Adobe Edition or something similar on Audacity. So it's you have it out, and then you say, well, what do I do next with the file? So it's still a .wav file, a WAV file, so it's high quality. And the next thing you want to move it into step 5 is the post-production. So you want to be bringing it into, if you move to Aphonic there, Sarah, please, the next slide, Aphonic. The reason, and this suggestion came from Wayne Denner. Back in Adobe Edition, I highlighted 2 key tools. So just to go over those, remember the razor tool, the cut, and the move tool. However, there is a lot deeper learning within Adobe Edition when you come into levelers and noise reduction, etc., etc., etc. Now, I think it's important, and I have been through this process. I think it's important to go through that to get a full understanding. However, if you were to put it into some kind of software like Audacity or Adobe Edition, and then at the end of it, put it through something like this, I'm going to show you now, Aphonic, that will level out the noise reduction, and it will do a lot of the post-production for you. So you will see in this slide ahead of you, I have 2 done this week. You get up to 2 hours free over, I think, either a month or every 21 days. And really, unless you're podcasting every week, this would be fine. So this takes a lot of the pain away from the editing, and this has been a real savior for me. So the key thing for me to highlight to you here is this little button. You'll sign up for a Aphonic account. It is free. There are paid versions as well, but for what most of you probably listening to this today, it's free. So you bring the file, remember you've exported, you bring it into Aphonic, you hit this button here, says new production, and really, honestly, it's relatively straightforward. You upload the file. What it'll take in Aphonic, it'll take about, for let's say a 45-minute interview, 45-minute podcast, it'll take about 20 minutes. So you do that, and then at the end of that, you will get a notification, and really that is your file. That will come out as an MP3 file. I think that it comes out as. So, Sarah, if you'd move now to the next slide, please. So, again, back into the roadmap. We're now at a critical stage. You now have this file, and the big question is, well, what are you going to do with it? This is one of the most straightforward ways of distributing podcasts. I like it. There are free versions and there are paid versions. The one in front of you is we're using is a free version, and it's called Anchor. Now, Anchor is automatically linked to Spotify. Don't think it's linked to iTunes, but it is linked to another RSS feeds and another lot of podcasting channels it's listened to, linked to. You will as well have to probably manually you'll have to submit your podcast to some of these channels as well. So on this slide here, what you can see is we've been through all of the steps with Brack Tours, and they launched theirs on this Wednesday, and they did that through Anchor. So you sign up for the account here, you have your own little dashboard. You know what, even if you didn't have your own website, you could have an account with Anchor and that could work for you. And you know, there's their settings, there's just the one episode, but they were working on episode 2 and episode 3. So distribution and Anchor I found very, very good, but it doesn't do everything. So, you know, you'd probably be moving, once you get into podcasting from Anchor, you would probably then be moving more to Buzzsprout, which is more of a commercial podcasting distribution platform. It would distribute to many, but Anchor to begin with is very, very useful. If you'd move on to the next slide, Sarah, please. Had we got a video with that, Sarah? No, don't think that. If you go back, there should be a video. Yes, there is. Sorry, I thought there was a video. No. Yeah, this one's only 2 minutes.
I think it's the 6th step of our podcasting roadmap. And here now we've taken the file out of Auphonic and we're going to bring it into Anchor. Anchor is a podcast distribution platform. There's also Buzzsprout. Anchor is free to begin with. There are different pricing structures, but certainly for beginners and podcasters, it's one that I would thoroughly recommend. You can get on to others. So this is what we did with Travel with Brack Tours, one of the companies that we're working for. And you can see here, our first episode is published. It's all been set up now. We haven't gone into monetization. That's really not for today's workshop, but you know, I've seen lots of other podcasts, the ones that we talked about at the beginning of this workshop, where you can have sponsors, and there is a way of setting that up. By all means, this is something that you could pursue at a later date. So let's have a look at then. We can see it's available on 2 platforms. Let's view the public site. We're still on Anchor, so obviously there's a bit of work to do here in getting your details filled up on this. Just taking that for a wee minute to upload. Okay, so this has all been Colin Murphy, a friend of mine who we're doing this project with. You have the option to listen on Spotify there, or you can play the file just here. There's an option to share, and then that would be the website of Brack Tours there, and you can message. So this is really where it starts to get better for distribution. This is their first episode. So I'm just going to...
Welcome to Travel with Brack Tours, a new podcast series about travelling around Ireland and Scotland. We'll be sharing stories and travel.
We've already heard that. So I guess I like this. I like its simplicity. Remember, when we get to this stage, we're almost there. And this really will help with the social sharing. Haven't as yet talked about Headliner app, which would be also at stage 6, really would be another option as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Apologies, and I'm sorry if you got a double whammy there, but actually there was the video was better than my attempts to explain. So thank you for that, Sarah. If you'd move on, I think, to the next slide. Okay, now, so you've been through Anchor and you still want to know how else can you promote this podcast? Well, like yesterday, I'm going to give you some recommendations before I get into Headliner. LinkedIn, for most of the businesses listening today, on LinkedIn, I would suggest that you do an article on LinkedIn about your podcast and who you're interviewing. Remember, you can repurpose the content, and this is where planning becomes really, really important. So LinkedIn would be a big player. Obviously, with the likes of the Headliner app, it's linked to Facebook, it's linked to Twitter. It's not linked to Instagram, it's linked to YouTube and a few others, but you need to really, really be thinking about your distribution. Like for many of you of the businesses listening, and again, Southern Regional College here, our business support staff, we have an email distribution list, again with GDPR, that we're allowed to send content to. So, you know, your email distribution list would be another great way of getting your message out. So in terms of the Headliner app then, so what you see here is this is a way, there's a free version that I'm showing, there is also a paid version, so I'm using the free version, and it really allows you to do a short video really what is called an audiogram. And again, thanks to Wayne for introducing us to this. So I did this a couple of days ago, and promoting my Tomorrow's Visitors site, and very, very useful. So I would thoroughly recommend that when you get to this step 6, that you consider the headliner wrap. Sarah, I'm hoping that there's a wee video there in the next slide. So just as Sarah's loading that up, I'm going to explain that this is my logo for the Tomorrow's Visitors, and all you're going to hear really is part of my introduction. But you can do a piece to camera on your phone on this and load it up as an audiogram. Far away there, Sarah.
Welcome to the Tomorrow's Visitors podcast. My name is Kieran Swail. I'm a Tourism Innovation Specialist at Southern Regional College. I'm a big supporter of local tourism and bringing people together, and in this podcast series I'm going to be talking about tourism in Ireland, north and south, about emerging visitor trends and new technologies, new visitor experiences in culture and heritage and visitor attractions. I'm going to be talking to the connectors from tour guides to food and drink producers, from tour operators and agents to accommodation providers, trying to get a handle on what tomorrow's visitors are actually looking for, and finally then sharing some practical tips for tourism businesses. So for the latest episode, log on to tomorrowsvisitors.com, or if you have any ideas for future podcasts, please get in touch.
Sarah, if you just hold that slide. So I think what happened there is when I sent this to Sarah, it froze. So really you can see by the bar, this is actually a 45-second interview. And what happens, what I've done with that is I have taken my intro content and uploaded it. But as the video plays, you can see the text goes along the bottom, and you, instead of having just your logo, you could start with your logo, and then people could actually see you, and you could do a piece to camera, and it can be longer than 45 seconds. It can be up to 2-3. I actually think you can go as far as 10 minutes. I need to delve into that a bit more, but what an excellent way of promoting. So it's using short, sharp video. I suppose the classic, when you think about it, of how people use trailers. So when we're deciding for, Sarah was talking there about her movies and what she listens to in the Mayo and Kermode podcast show. So very often when I'm making a decision to watch something, I'll have a look at the trailer. So the headliner in this case is very, very useful. Okay, Sarah. Now on to, I suppose, our own then Tomorrow's Visitors podcast. So my friend and colleague Cahill has helped me put this site together. What you're seeing here is my presence on Anchor at the moment. And just as with the travel with BRAC tours, you can see then it's really, really important when you start to think about your artwork. And here I have the live recording of it. We don't need to play that, Sarah, but this is just to show you what it looks like on Anchor. And if you hit the next slide, Sarah, I think Spotify. Yeah. So now it all comes to life. You're still at step 6. You're now into the real distribution. I was telling you yesterday about my son listening to Spotify, and so it looks real here. And the importance again of combining both the video and the audio are at play here. And give a wee bit of thought into what kind of logo and what you're going to say. But this is for me, when you see it here, it starts to become real. And, this is, it took me a bit of time, I suppose, to get here. But now that I'm here, very, very worthwhile. And certainly I'd be recommending you to invest a bit of time and resources into doing this. But when you see it on Spotify, well, you're up and running. I'm not saying you've made it, because the success is in distribution and downloading. Just on that, I think one of the wonderful things about podcasts is a podcast can be repurposed many times. And I've gone back to listen to podcasts, particularly on the MTB trail one there, on the cycling one, on interviews, and maybe a year or 2 or 3 years later. This podcast that I've done with John Fitzgerald of Ballyhura, I'm going to send on to people who want to visit the region, but I know I could come back and listen to it at a later stage if I wanted to go and visit there. So for those of you that are in tourism, for me, podcasting is a great way of saying to visitors. For those of you in distribution, of explaining things. For those of you in retail, what a great way of being able to explain what your products are. Okay, Sarah, if you move on to the next slide. And again, for the Spotify, that's what the Travel with Brack Tours, that's what their site looks like, and that can be easily amended at any time. Yes, sir, if you move on then. So at this stage, it's just about 20 past 10. I've been talking, and my colleagues haven't been talking that much, but I've been talking quite a lot. Just run down these here. These are useful links. I would ask you all to listen to both our Tomorrow's Visitors and our Brack Tours, two podcasts there. A good friend, Wayne Denner, he's got a little book on a podcasting course, 0 Lives Left podcast. Buzzsprout, there's lots of resources out there. Go have a click on the Buzzsprout one. The Headliner app and the Aphonic and the Anchor are all there for you to click on and sign up to. And then that's just Ben Sounds is one of many. At this stage then, Sarah, will I take some questions, or do you want to talk about the further support, Sarah?
If you could take some questions, there's some coming in just at the minute.
Okay.
A few of them have been focusing on what are the ongoing costs. You've talked briefly about
Sure.
the initial costs, the microphone and whatever, but what about the hosting costs and the distribution costs? Okay,
so thanks. That's a really, really good question. Well, the sites that I've shown you so far, and I'm going to come on to my own, most of those are free. The distribution you can use, if we talk first about production, Audacity is a free software. It's just a bit, there's a bit more probably learning, and maybe not just as intuitive as Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition costs, it can be expensive if you're not part of that Adobe suite as a business. It can be $19.99 a month, but there's a package for you get all the Adobe suite for £49 a month. That's everything. So if you're going to be committed in a business to marketing and distribution, that might be a consideration for you. There might be other ways, you know, if you know someone, if you have a friend or an educational license, or you're linked to education, there might be a way of being able to access that. Maybe start with Audacity then before you jump into Adobe. In terms of the equipment, well, you know, you can get up and running. That's not expensive. There's some of the stuff that I've talked about, and I've given you some costs on that. In terms of the hosting then, Sarah, Tomorrow's Visitors is hosted on a on a WordPress site, and again, Cahal's helped me do that. I think you're hosting maybe about £69-70 a year for that, but that's a separate blog site. So I imagine many in listening to this will have their own website, and you know they don't necessarily need to set up one. It's going to work for me because it's a great way for learning. So for anybody who's thinking about this, certainly at Southern Regional College, we can help you with the looking at the production of the websites there are and e-commerce for that matter. So there is a wee bit of cost into hosting charges. You know, you could be into that, around that figure, certainly under £100 a year for hosting it, if you're willing to invest a bit of time into learning about how to do this. You could pay somebody to do this, obviously, but I think the biggest cost, really, in answer to your question, Sarah, is one of investment in time. And you know, a commitment to a podcasting strategy will definitely bring you many benefits. But the thing that I should highlight to you, Sarah, is there is a bit of learning. There's a learning curve there, and you need to kind of commit to it. But really, you know, if you're starting off, it isn't that expensive, and a great way to be thinking about your business, be thinking about how you communicate with your audience. Podcasting is here to stay, and I believe it's really, if you think the steps on a ladder, the podcasting is the step one of communicating with your audience.
That's great. So thank you, Kieran. So you're talking that the initial the ongoing costs aren't that much, but it could be very dependent on what your requirements are going forward and what your expectations are of the podcast. There's another question here about the memory that it would take on phones to listen to. I really think.
Can I address that one?
Yep.
So for those that maybe can't say, I'm not promoting brands here, that's an iPhone 6. It's about 4 years old. I have loads of podcasts on that. So doesn't take up any. This is where the distribution is really, really important. So it's the app that people are going to listen to. And this is where your strategy, and it's not just, you know, I just highlighted, I didn't even talk a lot about iTunes, didn't talk a lot about Google Podcasts, or there's a lot of, or Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud. There's lots of ways of receiving content. So the important thing is it will not take up a lot of space, not at all. No.
I also think there's different ways of listening, Kieran. So, you know, Spotify would be more streaming. So again, it could depend on how you listen. It really would depend on whether you would download and listen to it on your phone or stream it. You know, so there's different options.
There are. That's a really, really good point. I mean, you mentioned, Brian talked about in the car, and you mentioned about when you're doing your chores, and that I know your husband, by the way, does chores. He's not. You're not the only one that does chores. So I have to get him on and talk about his podcast. But I listen to the podcast when I'm walking. Really, I suppose, if I'm being honest, since this lockdown, since March. And I've listened to a lot more. So I tend to listen to most. Last night I listened to one for 45 minutes, the Peter Crouch, and it was great. So, you know, and I download that, Sarah. I have that on my phone, and it loads of space. So it's not video content, you know, like the sound files we're talking about. You know, you're talking about a 45-minute podcast, Sarah, is about 14 megabytes. You know, it's not big. It's really, really not. You know, when you're going to when you're distributing it, and then if you're doing it through an app, well, it's really not an issue. So hopefully that can address anyone who's concerned about that.
Well, also, I would listen on an Android phone. I have a Motorola. The memory's not great on it, but again, I'd be able to fill mine up, and I would have over 20 hours before it would say memory full, and so that's a good backlog of podcasts to get through. So. I don't think memory on a phone is really an issue when it comes to sound files. The next question is, does an unusual podcast title make it more difficult to find? E.g., if you have a word that can be spelled different ways. So I suppose that's if you're searching through the, I suppose that would come to how you promote it, would it? Yeah.
It does. It does. Comes how you promote it, how you submit it, what you submit it to. I think, like all things in marketing, if we looked at the podcast that we all listen to, I mean, the fact that it's called That Peter Crouch Podcast already, it's quirky, straight in there. Do you know, it's I noticed the one, I think it was Sarah Travers, you might have had on, but she didn't seem to use her name, so she decided not to brand her name, and she would be very famous in Northern Ireland. So it does depend. I've opted for the name being relevant. But, you know, I suppose I could have said Tomorrow's Visitors Northern Ireland or Tomorrow's Visitors Ireland, but I wanted to keep it broader than that. And so the name is relevant. I guess the key thing, not to get too stuck on this, is how you distribute it and how you go about promoting it. So, for example, the name could come into play on your Headliner app. You can use that name, Funky, you know, whatever it is. And when the big thing, Sarah, is being committed. And this isn't just podcasting, this is video, this is all aspects of your business, how you're communicating with businesses. You know, this notion of, it's way back in marketing here, the notion of recency. And recency is where we're receiving content in multiple ways now. So audio is one of them, but there are other ways. So keeping in front of your customers is really, really important. So not just promoting it through sound, but promoting it through your LinkedIn and your other ways as well. So don't get, you know, the brand is going to be important, the artwork is important, but, you know, don't get too caught up in it. More the strategy is the content. What is the content? What are you going to say? Why are you going to say it? Who are you going to say it to? The old W5, you know, where are you going to say it? Who, what, when, where, why? You know, apply that W5 to your podcast strategy.
I think another thing to consider would maybe be not to be too specific, because where you start out is not always where you're going to end up. You need to think about, you don't want to limit your potential with the project before you've even really started. So you don't want it to be too random, but at the stage, you know, somewhere there's a fine line in there.
There's a balance, and I hear your point. I suppose when you dig into podcasting, the niche end of it as well is relevant, because not everybody wants to be a gardener, not everybody wants to be a choral singer, not everybody wants to be a magician. So you can go narrow and deep, or as you're suggesting there, you can broaden it out a wee bit. I've probably gone for the latter strategy there. So that allows me in my role at Southern Regional College and outside of work. I mean, mine is very much a brand with how I feel about things in life, and tourism is an important part of who I am. So just again, give a wee bit of thought of the most important thing for me, Sarah, is why are you doing the podcast? That's the most important thing, and what are you going to get out of it, and what's your audience going to get out of it, and is it relevant?
Yeah, because I think an hour of content takes a lot longer than that to prepare and to put out there. So you really need to commit to the process to want to do it.
Yeah, totally. I'm conscious it's 10:30, Sarah. I'm thinking here, just before you finish your bit, can I just finish my wee bit and say, we're working with a couple of other clients as well on podcasting. If there's anybody out there, I know I received from Beata, who's a tour guide. I know I received an inquiry from Beata. I'll be in touch with you, Beata, if you're listening to this. But certainly we would be delighted to help you, not just on the podcasting end of it, but anything to do with your business. If we can help, we will, particularly an element of innovation. And this goes across all ours in food and tourism and engineering and in IT and in e-commerce and in AR and VR and the list goes on, that we could help you with in business. We are supported. This is supported by Connected, but we have a number of funds that Sarah's now going to talk. Thanks very much. I'd like to say particularly to Sarah, Brian and Ashley, and to see my colleague James there as well today from the business support team. And, I'd really like to say we do these webinars as a team. And this week, that's really come to the fore for me, because the team here have been very, very supportive. So from my end of it, thank you very, very much. I hope you've enjoyed this. Many ways of getting in touch with us at Business Support, my email. And Sarah then is going to talk a little bit now about our funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kieran. Just wanted to talk about, we've talked about what you can do with a podcast, but I wanted to talk about how we can help you get there. And there's quite a number of support packages that SRC offer. So, start with the Skills Focus program. This is a training program, and it's funded by the Department of Economy to provide non-mandatory training. It's recently been extended from 75% funded to fully funded in response to the current situation. So any extra skills that you want with any of these programs that Kieran had mentioned earlier, this is a great opportunity to work on with that. The Innovatus program is to offer 30 to 60 hours of mentoring or upskilling on a one-to-one basis through virtual, on-site, or at the college premises for an innovative product, process, or service. There are innovation vouchers. They're a great way to avail of R&D opportunities and resources for innovative solutions for business issues. Although with this program, it is really important to remember the VAT element to it. And this one's funded by Invest NI, but there is a comparable product available with Enterprise Ireland. The Fusion program, a slightly bigger program. It's to offer businesses the opportunity to take a high caliber graduate into your business, partially funded through the Intertrade Ireland with the mentor support provided by the college. And there's a KTP, which is similar, and it's funded through Innovate UK. So as you can see, we have lots of support available. So please contact us at Better Business at src.se.uk, and we'll talk through your specific requirements. We're holding further webinars. So next week on the 14th of August, we have cybersecurity event with Brian McGee. And the following Friday is the 21st, and it's lean implementation with Jimmy Moore. So please keep an eye on our social media channels to see when we plan our autumn series. Once we get done with these two, there will be an autumn series of webinars. And also we have links to recordings of previous ones if you've missed and maybe you want to go back and have a look. So I think we've taken up quite enough of your time today. Thank you very much for everybody that's dialed in and given us some of your time. Any questions, please contact us, and we'll do what we can to help you. Thank you very much.